There's a car everyone recognizes on sight, but almost nobody actually understands. It rolls down the street, drivers automatically pull over, and there's exactly one thought in everybody's head: death. But if that's all you see, you're missing almost a century of design, coach building, and American pop culture. People used to call it a kind of vehicular carron, the car that carries you on your last ride. And here's the strange part. The exact vehicle built for funerals is the same one that's got thousands of people wanting to collect it, restore it, and drive it as a daily driver. So why did a car built around fear end up being one of the most misunderstood machines in automotive history? Before cars existed, how you got to your final resting place said a lot about your place in society. Wealthy families were carried in elaborately carved, horse-drawn carriages, covered in Gothic imagery, from hand-carved skulls to bronze torches mounted on either side. Regular folks got a bier, basically a hand-pulled cart to the grave. Frankly, that kind of gap sounds pretty brutal by today's standards. The name hearse has nothing to do with death, though. It comes from the Latin herpex, through the French hearse, both meaning harrow, a farming tool used to break up soil. In the trade, people call it something more formal, a funeral coach. When cars showed up, the funeral business took a strange detour. The first motorized hearses weren't gas-powered at all. They were electric, because electric motors were quieter, more fitting for a solemn occasion, while internal combustion engines back then were still loud and crude. In 1909, an undertaker named H.D. Ludlow decided to try something different. He commissioned the first gas-powered hearse by mounting the body of an old horse-drawn hearse onto a bus chassis. That car made its debut at the funeral of Wilfred Pruin. That same year, the Crane and Breed Company of Cincinnati became the first manufacturer to build gas-powered hearses commercially. You'd think cheaper would win out fast. Not quite. A gas-powered hearse cost 4 times as much as an electric or horse-drawn one. But by the 1920s, funeral directors figured out something simple. Gas engines were faster, which meant they could handle more funerals in a single day and make more money doing it. Within about a decade, electric hearses were practically gone from the American funeral business. You can't walk into a Cadillac dealership and drive off with a complete funeral coach, even though it looks that way from the outside. Cadillac only sold what's called a commercial chassis, an unfinished car consisting of the frame, the engine, and the front end up through the front doors. Everything else, the entire rear section, was built by a third-party, independent coach builders like Eureka, Hearse and Eisenhart, Miller-Meteor, and Superior Coach. The front end looks like any luxury sedan, but right past the A-pillar, everything changes. The body stretches longer, the roof gets taller, and the rear compartment expands to hold a casket. The back doors are roughly twice the size of a normal sedan's, wide enough for 2 people to carry a casket through without turning sideways. Carrying a casket, a driver, and sometimes a full team of pallbearers means a hearse weighs a lot more than a standard passenger sedan. So the commercial chassis underneath had to be different too. Bigger brakes, a stronger brake booster, a longer drive shaft to match the extended frame, and heavier-duty tires to handle the weight shifted toward the back. In other words, the front half of the car belongs to the manufacturer, and the entire back half belongs to a craft that's almost disappeared from the modern auto industry. That's why an old hearse parked on the curb looks both familiar and completely foreign at the same time. In the 1920s, a hearse still looked more like a horse-drawn carriage than an automobile because the entire car industry was still shaped by carriage design. But by the early 1930s, Art Deco and the streamlined movement swept through Detroit, cars started getting sleeker lines, and the hearse business followed right along. Sayers and Scoville, the Ohio coach builder, rolled out the Landau-style hearse sometime in the mid to late 1920s, and it quickly became the most popular style in the industry. Some of the art-carved hearses even used hand-carved wood on the rear body, echoing the wooden drapery panels seen on old horse-drawn hearses. The late 1930s, LaSalle Sayers and Scoville Damascus hearse is one example, with intricate carving running down both sides. The most interesting detail on these Landau hearses is the Landau S-bar. On old Landau-style convertibles, that bar actually did something. It helped fold the soft top down. But on a hearse with a completely fixed roof, that bar does nothing at all. It just sits there to look formal and classic, a nod back to the carriage era. Sayers and Scoville even added a vinyl roof to sell the illusion of a convertible, even though the roof underneath was solid as sheet metal. The late 1940s into the 1950s told a different story. American cars were drowning in chrome, bold colors, and sharp space-age lines. The problem was that a hearse still needed to look solemn and serious, usually black, so those two impulses kept crashing into each other. Take the 1959 Cadillac Hearse. Those massive tail fins made it look like it rolled straight out of the future, while the rear cabin and black vinyl roof pulled it straight back into the Middle Ages. Plenty of coach builders had to rework the factory tail end just to make the conversion fit, since fin styling was never designed to play nice with a casket compartment. On that same 1960 Cadillac platform, 4 coach builders took 4 completely different directions. Eureka kept the roof line close to the stock Cadillac, not too tall, which gave the whole car a more private feel. Hess and Eisenhart leaned formal, almost conservative. Miller-Meteor went the other way, favoring two-tone paint and a taller roof than either of the others, and Superior Coach pushed everything furthest into space-age territory with an oversized Landau S-bar, a canopy-style roof, and something almost nobody else used, a reverse panorama windshield. From the 1960s through the 1980s, the Hearse hit peak cultural recognition, more than any other purpose-built vehicle in American automotive history. Hollywood and television kept borrowing its unsettling image, sometimes to scare people, sometimes just to get a laugh. In the 1964 episode Rockabye Munster, Lily Munster wants to buy Herman a car, so she has a customizer weld together a T-bucket hot rod and a 1920s V8 Cunningham Hearse. George Barris took the job, finished it in 21 days for around $18,000, and the result was the Munster coach, an 18-foot ride with 3 separate compartments for each family member. Ecto-1 showed up exactly 20 years later, built on a 1959 Cadillac Miller-Meteor Futura Duplex, an end-loader combination ambulance and hearse, of which only about 400 were ever made. The film crew picked it up for $4,800, kept the 390 cubic inch V8 under the hood, and those tail fins are still considered the largest ever fitted to a mass production car. Painting it white was probably the crew's smartest call, since the original black paint would have all but disappeared in those nighttime New York shots. The Munster coach and Ecto-1 usually get the most attention, but the Jaguar from Harold and Maude deserves just as much credit. Harold originally drove a 1959 Cadillac Series 75 with a superior hearse body until his mother swapped it for a Jaguar E-Type. hoping to make him less obsessed with death. Instead, Harold converted the Jaguar into a hearse himself, complete with landau bars, and the man who actually built the conversion, Red Harden, spent 6 months getting it done. The car meets its end, driven off a cliff, in the film's final scene. Movies can move the used car market in strange ways. After Phantasm hit theaters in 1979, plenty of fans went hunting for old Cadillac Miller-Meteors, and quite a few of them found cars for just a few hundred to $1,000, sometimes with only a few thousand miles on the odometer. For a B-movie horror flick, that's a pretty odd way to save an entire model line from the scrapyard. But not everyone who buys a used hearse is chasing a movie memory. It ends up in places you'd never expect. Back in the 1940s, some families bought old hearses simply because it was the only car they could afford, one that even doubled as the ride to a high school football game. In the early 1970s, it wasn't unusual for a teenager to drive the family funeral home's old hearse to school every morning. And for one house painter in the 1950s, a hearse was basically a disguised work truck, long enough to haul ladders without strapping anything to the roof. Look closer, and the appeal isn't much of a mystery. A hearse has more cargo space than almost anything else on the road, a heavy-duty air conditioning system built to cool a big car on long drives, and since nobody drives a hearse like they're racing to a green light, the whole car tends to get babied for its entire life. Even the curtains over the back windows, originally there for the casket's privacy, ended up making it one of the most discreet cars you could drive. To a lot of people, it's just a giant, cheap, slightly strange, wildly practical station wagon. Plenty of folks have said they wanted a 1959 Cadillac hearse as their first car, or that they're saving up for an old one right now, simply because for them, that's where purpose and design meet. But over in Japan, the story takes a completely different turn. As Japan's middle class grew, the demand for more elaborate funeral ceremonies grew right along with it. But instead of following the West toward modernization, many families wanted to return to tradition. The result was a style of hearse called Miyagata, or shrine style, with the rear body built into a structure resembling a Buddhist temple roof, intricately carved and finished in lacquer and gold. The trend peaked in the 1980s, but it's been fading as younger families go back to choosing conventional Western-style hearses. In America, the strangest experiment came from a company known for shiny aluminum trailers, Airstream. In 1981, right as motorhome sales were sinking under a fuel crisis, a funeral director named Dale Kloss approached Airstream with an idea that broke completely from tradition: put the entire family and the deceased in one vehicle, instead of splitting everyone across multiple limousines. The Airstream funeral coach was born from that pitch, carrying 14 living passengers, 1 casket, and 20 bouquets of flowers, with a dedicated flower compartment in the rear and a discreet side bay for the casket. It sold for $85,000, more than the cost of a standard hearse plus 2 funeral limousines combined. Only 32 were ever built, spread across a full decade from 1981 to 1991, before the whole idea quietly disappeared. One culture looked backward to hold on to something slipping away. The other invented something that had never existed to solve a very real problem: how to get a grieving family through the day, together, in the same car. Both approaches are now being tested by something much simpler: body style. For decades, hearses only needed a boxy, formal, upright luxury sedan to build on, the classic Cadillac or Mercedes shape. Through the 1990s and the 2000s, That formula still worked fine, but those old-school luxury sedans are disappearing from the market. Today's luxury cars are all sharp creases, aggressive angles, more sport than solemn. Some people in the industry have already started talking about stretching a Cadillac Escalade as the next platform, but that's still just an idea being floated, and nobody's sure yet whether an SUV, a van, or some kind of electric limousine will end up being the foundation for the funeral car of the future. Given the choice, I'd want to be carried off in a classic 1950s Cadillac Hearse. Right now, I'm 25 years old. Say I make it to 75, that's still about 50 years to go. By then, a 1950s Cadillac Hearse would be pushing 120 years old, and there's a real chance I'd end up settling for whatever Cadillac exists today. By then, a 50-year-old car itself. But a hearse has never just carried the dead. It carries the aesthetic of every era it passed through. Gothic horse-drawn carriages, Art Deco curves, Cadillac tail fins, vinyl roofs, Japanese Miyagata structures, the commercially doomed but ambitious Airstream, and now stretched SUVs. It looks like it should be the least alive car in the entire industry, given how tightly it's tied to death. But in classic car culture, it outlives most other cars by a wide margin, living on through movies, through collectors' garages, through car shows, and through the strange stories of the people who once owned one. If the first car of your life usually represents freedom, the last car of your life says a whole lot about the era you lived through. And maybe that's exactly why a hearse has never just been a funeral car.